What's your funniest this person is on another level of stupid moment? Story 1. My stepbrother was baffled by the fact that dogs are colorblind. He once saw his reflection in our dog's eye, and it was in color. He couldn't understand how a colorblind dog could see his reflection in color. I tried to explain to him, but I don't think he really got it. Another time he told me he thought babies are born at age 1. He's a white guy who hasn't lived in a culture where they count ages from 1. So I explained to him that's not how it works. He tried to count back from the current year to his birthday year, but he lost count a few times and got confused. In the end, he decided that it was an agree to disagree situation, where neither of us could be sure who was right. He also told me that he thought every book should have a quick summary of what's happening and who the characters are on every page. He said that he was sick of picking up a book after a while and forgetting what was happening and who the characters were. I guess everyone has their own unique way of looking at the world. According to my friends, dogs are only red or green colorblind. You learn something new every day. That dude took the blue pill and believed whatever he wanted to believe. I mean, seriously, how else can you explain his logic? Story 2. I'm fairly certain that people who work at front of the house desks deal with so many clueless people that they start to lose their own sense of sanity. One time, I needed to see my doctor. My bus home from work stopped right outside his office, so I decided to just walk in and see if I could make an appointment there and then. The waiting room was empty, and I went up to the woman at the desk. She asked if I had an appointment. I told her I didn't and would like to make one. She told me that I'd have to call the number and pointed to it on the sign. I asked if I could just make an appointment with her, and she again pointed out the number on the sign. I asked who I'd be talking to when I called the number, and she said that she would answer the phone. So I took my phone out of my pocket, looking her in the eye the whole time, and called the number. The phone on her desk started ringing, and she actually said, "Excuse me 1 second." She answered the phone, and then I had a conversation with her on the phone while standing right in front of her. I asked for an appointment. She asked when I wanted it. I said that right now would be good. She said, "Okay," took my details, and hung up. She then looked at me and said, "How can I help you?" I told her that I had an appointment, and she told me to have a seat. I sat down while she typed some info into her computer. Then the digital signboard popped my name up, and she spoke into the microphone to call my name as I was sitting there. I was the only person in the room. When I went up to the desk, she said, "Hello, sir. How can I help you?" "I have an appointment." Name? I mean, what the heck? Story 3. I had a summer camp counselor who had a unique understanding of cooling systems. On one scorching hot day, she insisted that all the kids on the school bus keep the windows up because she believed we were basking in the glory of air conditioning. We were all sweating like pigs, but I mustered up the courage to enlighten our 40-year-old counselor. I leaned over and told her that the air conditioning we were supposedly feeling was nothing but the wind breezing in through the open window beside our bus driver. But oh, she wasn't having any of it. She brushed off my explanation and refused to disturb the bus driver, who focused on the road. Keep in mind, we had a good hour ahead of us on that bus. Finally, as the heat continued to rise, our counselor couldn't take it anymore. She mustered up the courage to ask the bus driver if the bus had air conditioning. To our surprise, he responded with a grin and said, "The bus only had air conditioning when the windows are down and the wheels are turning." I couldn't help but grin too, and I glanced back at our counselor, who seemed rather pleased with herself. "See," she said with a triumphant look, "I told you the bus had air conditioning." And just like that, we were stuck with the windows up for the rest of the journey.
What was the worst time you walked in?
Rufus Rugs, open up! Sorry for barging in like that, but I just had to share the sponsor of today's video. Me and the boys from Rufus Rugs. Now you might be saying to yourself,
excuse me, what the actual are you doing in my house?
But I can assure you're gonna like this. We've been hard at work creating the best quality and premium hand-tufted rugs money can buy. Now imagine this. You, chilling on your bed, watching a Rufus Stories video, and staring at a rug that's not just a rug. Nope, it's a masterpiece. It's the kind of rug that makes your friends wish they were you. But they're not. And the best part is that these aren't your average cheap quality rugs. Nope, each one is handcrafted by me and the boys. No shortcuts, no robot assembly lines, and no dropshipping BS. Just pure rug grind. Whether you love anime, sports, cars, or anything else you can think of, we can turn it into a rug. So click the first link in the description and have your custom idea come to life.
Story 4. I locked myself out of my apartment with my purse, keys, and cell phone inside. I headed to the office to ask maintenance for help. The woman at the desk said she would call maintenance, but she needed a phone number to reach me. I explained that my cell phone was locked in my apartment, so I didn't have a number to give her. She insisted that she needed a number, even if I couldn't answer it. I said if I could get into my apartment to get my cell phone, I wouldn't need maintenance to let me in. She didn't seem to understand my logic, but perhaps she was just trying to follow protocol. I gave her my number, and 10 minutes later, maintenance showed up. Since many people are asking, you don't need a key to lock the door to the apartment, just to unlock it. On my way out, I turned the lock on the back of the doorknob and then pulled the door shut, locking it. I had put my keys in my purse because I was also carrying a laptop bag and a few other things. I thought I'd picked up my purse with the other bags, but I hadn't. Yes, I know it was stupid for locking myself out. Story 5. The woman at the desk sounded like a broken NPC in a video game. She kept repeating the same line over and over again, even though it made no sense. This was my first experience in retail, and I quickly learned what many customers would be like. The seasons were changing, so we put a lot of shirts on sale in the front of the store. I was working the register when a woman came up to buy some items. I rang her up and could tell that something was wrong. "Why is this so much?" she asked. "I'm sorry," I said. "Can you clarify?" "This should be $10, not $20, she said. I thought that maybe her item was on sale, so I asked her to point out the sign because I wasn't aware of it. Our store was small, so we didn't have to walk far. "This sign here," she said. "This sign says that all shirts are 50% off," I said. "Yes, so why is this full price?" she asked. "This is a hat," I said. The woman glared at me for a moment, then turned and walked away. I guess no matter how clear you are, some people will still find a way to be confused. Story 6. I grew up in a country where English is not the first language. One day in elementary school, we had to write an essay in English class. I wanted to score an A, so I added a beautiful sentence with some very elaborate words toward the end. The teacher marked nothing wrong but that particular sentence. She said it wasn't grammatically correct. I didn't have the heart to tell her that I had copied the entire sentence verbatim from an English textbook published by Oxford. Also, this one event, I said, "I can't use this, I'm left-handed." And I was the idiot who thought a left-handed shovel existed. No, I wasn't trying to get out of work. I was literally so stupid that I thought I couldn't use it. To give the story a little more depth, here's what happened. We were digging up the long jump pit, and the shot put a vector at my school to get it ready for the home meet. And when it was my turn to shovel, some upperclassmen decided to pull a prank on me and tell me that it was a right-hand shovel. Knowing that I was left-handed, they sat back and watched the fireworks as I made a fool of myself. The lesson here, guys, is not to be gullible, or you'll end up like the only person in the world who doesn't get the joke. Story 7. While driving from one big city to another, I stopped in a small town in Texas to eat at a fast food chain. I ordered my food and got my orange number tent, then sat down to wait. The woman who was bringing out the orders had a defeated demeanor as she called out numbers that guests weren't claiming. Each time this happened, she would speak to a couple of tables trying to figure out who the food was for. Then I heard her call for number 55 while holding a tray of food for one person. I was number 54, and noticed that I was the only single-party guest there. We made eye contact and she headed towards me. She confirmed my order with me and said, "Sorry, for some reason the computer prints one number higher." I immediately asked, "Well then, why don't you just call one number lower than what's printed?" She froze and I could see the wheels turning in her head. I told her, "Thank you," and she went on her way. Story 8. My wife's cousin and her new husband, not the father of her child, fell on hard times and needed a place to stay for a while. We set up a queen-sized air mattress in the living room for them. For 3 weeks, I woke up to go to work, and every morning saw them sleeping on it sideways with their legs dangling off the edge. Then one day, she asked me to buy her a bigger air mattress, because this one was hurting their backs. I told her to turn her body. The thing even had a built-in pillow on one end. She responded that they couldn't see the TV. Then woman frickin' turned the air mattress to face the TV. That's the story of how I became a jerk to the poor side of the family. The bad part is that it's only one of many stories. Her child's father was a cook at Applebee's, and her new husband was another cook at the same freaking Applebee's, all working together. Story 9. My boss asked me to file the spam emails. This guy was a real know-it-all, so I figured he had his own reasons for wanting me to do this. I couldn't find any spam emails that weren't already in the spam folder, but that didn't stop him from coming over to my desk and yelling at me about it. He threw a manila folder labeled spam on my desk and told me to file it. When I looked at him skeptically, he insisted that the IT guy had told him that's where the spam goes. I just gave up and did what he said. I know this sounds crazy, but I have photo proof. My nails were bitten to the nubs that day. Behold, a piece of evidence that dinosaurs still roam the earth. But I'm not sure what's funnier, the fact that the boss is a literal dinosaur, or the fact that the IT guy trolled him. These stories should either leave you laughing or give you a dozen facepalm moments. Show some support by hitting that like button and subscribing to my channel. Story 10. I couldn't believe it when I saw someone miss their exit on the highway, stop on the shoulder, back up, turn around, and go up the entrance ramp. Here are a few details about the incident that really highlight its stupidity. The next exit was a few miles up the road. Going to that exit, then turning around would have delayed their drive by 15 minutes max. There was no traffic ahead. I watched this person do this as I was coming down the same entrance ramp to get onto the highway. Another story I remember was when a dim-witted girl I went to high school with asked our history teacher if she ever owned a slave. I'm aware that slavery still exists today, but this was in the context of the American Civil War. Slavery is not legal in the United States. To all of you who are saying, but the 13th Amendment, thankfully there is legal precedent outside the specific wording of the amendment that has determined what does and does not fall under the definition of involuntary servitude. Please stop trying to educate me. Story 11. Before the days of hotspots and widespread Wi-Fi, an editor-in-chief asked me to access the server before she went on vacation. I assumed she wanted to be able to access the company files remotely, so I set her up with a VPN and FTP access for all the servers she used. The next week, she called my boss furious because she was at her cabin in the middle of nowhere and had no internet. Apparently, she had assumed that access to the server meant wireless internet service, and that I would somehow enable her brand new neon orange iBook to access some mystical Wi-Fi network made from sunshine and rainbows. My boss wanted me to apologize, but I refused. I told him that the only apology she would get from me was, "I am deeply sorry. I assumed you weren't a complete idiot." Story 12. I wish I could make this up, but when I was in university, I was in a class and talked to a girl who sat next to me. One day, I brought hummus to class and she said, "Oh, that looks good. What is that?" I told her it was hummus and she said, "Lol, don't you mean dip? Hummus is the capital of Saudi Arabia." I explained to her that hummus is a type of dip made from chickpeas, and then I offered her some. We were classmates for a little while, but I had to stop studying with her because we talked about Latin America and poverty in class, and she informed me that to cure Latin America's poverty, Peru should just get rid of Machu Picchu and replace it with a giant resort to attract tourists. She said that Machu Picchu was too old and no one cared about it anymore. I found new people to study with. Other than that, she was a sweet girl. She just was very ignorant about a lot of things. I guess that's what happens when you get all of your information from TikTok. Story 13. I spent 7 years working for the Transportation Security Administration, the TSA. I had a pretty sweet detail where I would assist passengers who didn't have identification or answer questions from TSA agents about the validity of IDs. One day, I got a call on the radio asking for assistance in verifying an ID. I went over and the agent handed me a driver's license and said, "Can't accept this Canadian ID." Hearing this, I assumed it was expired or the wrong name. I took a look and saw that it was an Alaskan driver's license. I quickly approved the passenger and sent them on their way. I then spent 10 minutes explaining to the agent that 1. Canadian driver's licenses are acceptable according to TSA regulations, and 2. Alaska has never been a Canadian territory. By the way, this coworker had a master's degree in mathematics and served 25 years in the US Air Force. Story 14. I was helping a colleague with his graduate thesis film. My job was to animate a solar eclipse since we couldn't shoot one for real. I used some real-life reference footage to make the animation look realistic. When I showed it to my colleague, he asked why the moon was black and had no detail. I asked him if he had ever seen a solar eclipse, and he said yes, but he wanted this one to look surreal since it was the moon in front of the sun, unlike a normal solar eclipse. At this point, it became clear that something was wrong. I asked him a few more clarifying questions, and it became clear that he had no idea that the large object passing in front of the sun during a solar eclipse was, in fact, the moon. I confronted him about it, and he apologized for not being great with astrology. I contained my laughter and thought, dude, do you mean astronomy? Story 15. My friend is allergic to walnuts, but he's also very careless. One day in college, he made a sandwich with walnuts garnished on top of the bread. He told me he was aware of the walnuts, but he ate the entire sandwich anyway. I left to shower, and when I came back, there were 2 paramedics in our dorm taking him out on a stretcher. I was shocked. I asked him what happened, and he said that he had accidentally eaten some walnuts and his throat had started to close. He couldn't swallow his Benadryl, so he had to call 911. I couldn't believe that he'd eaten the sandwich even though he knew he was allergic to walnuts. It was a classic YOLO moment. Luckily, he didn't have any serious complications, and he learned his lesson. I don't think he's ever eaten walnuts again since then. That dude was a daredevil. He was 1 walnut away from weeding out the gene pool of some unfortunate genes. Story 16. I'm a high school teacher, and this year I gave a multiple choice quiz to a student. When I went to grade the first question, instead of choosing option A, B, C, or D, he wrote in his own option and circled it. E. I don't know. He did this for about 2/3 of the questions on the quiz. I appreciated his honesty, but guessing to get some points or leave the questions blank would have been wiser. Oh well. Of course I followed up with the student to see what was going on. In the end, we sorted things out. I wouldn't say he was stupid, but he didn't traditionally approach school. We ended up having a great year together. Story 17. A girl I knew was complaining about her car making a strange noise. She kept taking it to the repair shop, but they couldn't find anything wrong with it, so she sold her car and got a new one. She started complaining about the same noise in the new car. One day, she was in the car with a friend of mine, who was driving. She veered out of the lane slightly and hit the rumble strip. That's it. That's the noise my car makes, she said. This? He purposely drove onto the rumble strip again? Yes, she said. Guys, she sold her car because of a strange noise it was making that couldn't be fixed. Her nickname was Rumble Strip after that. Story 18. I used to work with a guy whose resume would grow every time he met a new person. He would suddenly claim to have done their job. I swear, if he ate Frosted Flakes for breakfast, he would claim to be a lion tamer by noon. He also loved the saying, you gotta be smarter than what you're working with. But obviously that can't be true because he claimed to have been a bricklayer. I guess that guy really took the saying, fake it till you make it, to the extreme. Story 19. We were in 7th grade science class, and the teacher was telling us about the vacuum of space. The dumbest girl I ever knew raised her hand and said, if a spaceman talked into a rock and handed it to somebody, would they hear it? The class went silent for a few seconds before our teacher explained that rocks are, in fact, not alien tape recorders. I knew this girl, and I don't think she was making a point about the matter. She literally made hand motions like a tape recorder and said stuff like this all the time. Once in high school, I let her cheat on my biology exam, and she wrote down the wrong answers. She couldn't even cheat correctly. And I have another one. My sister asked if the Eiffel Tower was in Paris or France, and couldn't understand how it could be both. This happened when she was in middle school. She's 26 now, and she went on to graduate from college at the top of her class. She later clarified that she meant to ask if the Eiffel Tower was in Paris or elsewhere in France, but she clearly didn't say it like that. Story 20. One dude burned down his convenience store for an insurance claim and stopped the milk and bread deliveries the day before. On another occasion, I was going through security at the airport and the person said I needed to show a different form of ID. I asked why, because I'd given my driver's license. They said I needed a US document like a green card or something. I'm a US citizen, of course. Then I realized that they didn't know that the District of Columbia is the same as Washington, D.C., the capital of our country. I also have an identical twin brother, and I've been asked all kinds of ridiculous questions about it throughout my life. But I think the stupidest question was when a girl asked me, "Do you ever get yourselves mixed up with each other?" I responded, "Are you asking me if I ever sometimes think I'm my brother?" She replied, "Yeah. No, I don't." Story 21. I was once a co-hostess with a girl in a restaurant, and we were watching ads on a hanging TV for a new movie. At the end, it said, "Coming soon to a theater near you." She turned to me with wide eyes and genuinely asked, "How do they know where I live?" There are many more stories about this girl, but this one sums her up the best. She also had to stop walking to drink anything or she would fall over. And she didn't understand that not all women have to wax their mustaches because not all women have them. She was 20 years old. Another time when the Fukushima nuclear power plant disaster happened, we were discussing how the reactor had failed in science class. 5 minutes into the conversation, a girl piped up and said, "I don't see what the big deal is. Why can't they just regrow it?" She seriously thought a nuclear power plant was a plant. I'm starting to think the education system is failing us, or maybe those people just grew up taking things way too literally. Hey, if you're still watching, I bet you'll like what are the most common mistakes people make in a relationship. Story 3 is absurd. Stay tuned.